Hello, folks. I'm Jeff C., and you're not. Coming to you with a special episode of Social Media News Live. Connor and I are currently both out of town at Ecamm's amazing creator camp. But I didn't want to leave you without something valuable in your streams. So today I'm sharing an interview I did on the Authentic Communicator with the amazing Kira Poggi. Kira is the host of the Authentic Communicator, where she helps creators find their authentic voice in a world full of noise. In this episode, we get into some great topics, like what it really means to be an authentic as a creator, how to overcome that pesky comparison trap, and even how AI tools can help us without taking away what makes us really unique. So if you're a marketer, small business owner, or solopreneur looking to connect with your audience in a more genuine way, this conversation is full of some great tips for you. Kira's perspective is really refreshing. She's one of my favorite people, and I think you'll love what she brings to the table. And while you're at it, do me a personal favor, will you? Head over to the Authentic Communicator on Spotify and leave her a great rating and review. It really does help podcasters grow and supports all the great work that Kira is doing. All right, let's get into it. Here's my chat with Kira on the Authentic Communicator.
Hi, and welcome to the Authentic Communicator. I'm Kira Poggi Brevka, your host for the show, and thank you so much for stopping by my little corner of the internet. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today. So if you're in the marketing space, you probably already know who this gentleman is. He is an expert podcast and video producer who has worked with some really big names in the industry, including Guy Kawasaki, Kim Garst, and Social Media Examiner. He had a podcast called Manly Pinterest Tips, which is still out there. You should go listen to it. It's super valuable. He's also an AI expert, explorer, and guru who has an amazing course on Descript and how you can leverage that in your marketing efforts. So I want to talk about that later as well. And he is head beard over at Social Media News Live, which I never miss a Friday. And if I do, I always catch it on the replay because it is really so valuable. And last but not least, he's also one of the best live presenters, and I mean that very genuinely, I have ever seen in a conference. He is Jeff C., and I'm not. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for asking me, and I really do appreciate you. I love seeing you in the comments on Fridays. I have like a good group of people that are usually always there, and if I don't see you there, I'm like, are you okay? And I just love having you on the show, so you always bring some great comments and questions to the guests we have on there.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. And I need to give you a shout out for this because as musical theater fans
that's right. Yeah.
During your live presentation for Momentum, in addition to it being like really educational, extremely funny, and so engaging, you gave us a little bit of Javert from Les Mis, which was unexpected, but totally awesome.
It was so expected for me. My daughter, who was filming, she's like, "What? I have never seen you do that before." I'm like, "I don't know, just a happened." So it was glad, and I knew you were a theater nerd too, so that was really fun.
It was epic. It was so epic. Not many live presenters have I seen that just like break out into song, but do a really good job of it. You got,
thank you.
You got applause. So
thank you.
So today we're here to talk about authenticity. And the reason I wanted to have a podcast around this is because I feel like the word authentic or authenticity has a lot of charge behind it. And I feel like not just in the marketing industry, but across business as well. A lot of people say, well, we have to be more authentic. We have to show our authentic side of the brand and all of that. But what does that really mean? And especially for a creator who's just starting out, I'd really love to explore what that means for creators. So I'm so happy that you're on the show because I really think Social Media News Live is that authentic, warm community space where every time I'm watching it, like there are all these little inside jokes with Connor and Paul that you have, and so much banter that you're like, you can't help but enjoy it because you guys are also having a good time and it's very genuine. But I feel like for somebody starting out, that seems unattainable, right? It's kind of scary. So
yeah,
how do you...
Go ahead. That's your question. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, how starting out, was that even in your through line? Was that your vision? Or what kind of inspired you to get into the creator space to start with?
I think So it kind of happened. It's always an accident, like I started, I had a video thing where I had a company where I was doing live video, not live video, but video commercials and long form content for companies. I started it way back in the day. And then I started doing website design, and I did Flash websites. You can thank me later. Remember those Flash websites? That was a long time ago.
I remember Flash websites.
Yes, and I actually remember when those credit card CDs everybody wanted to hand out. Like you put them in, they could play in your like disc player, and I printed those off. I had a thing that I would do those for companies. So then I got into website design, and then I started doing video and blog posts for people. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm telling everybody they need to be on social media. I probably ought to be on it too. And so I started my own blog. That led to me listening to a podcast, and I heard somebody saying, hey, Pinterest can drive all this traffic to your site. And I'm like, I need traffic. So I started doing that. And then I wrote a blog post called Manly Pinterest Tips #1. And it was about me sharing a secret board with my daughter where she could put recipes or gift ideas or crafts. And we did that together. And that kind of went viral. And then that was in the days of Google Plus, where the live video started. It was kind of the Wild West, and you could do stuff like we're doing now. We can pull up comments and all that kind of stuff. And I did that with 4 other guys who had way bigger followings than me, but I don't know why they let me hang out with them. But we had a show called Manly Pinterest Tips, and we got to interview people like Guy Kawasaki. We got the director of Pretty Woman and producer of Pretty Woman and Under Siege. All these people wanted to come on the show because it was the Wild West. And so that's how it kind of started. I always did video first for my podcast and all that stuff because I'm lazy, and it was one way to get content. Even back then, I knew I was like, if I can do it this, I can have at least a podcast and clips for YouTube or whatever. And so that's how it started.
So actually, I'm just gonna, in the interest of being completely authentic, because it's one of my goals.
Yeah.
With this podcast, I'm gonna let the listeners know that I had a tech issue on my side. With my headphones. And so we actually did have to stop and restart recording. And so for those of you who are listening and who are nervous about that happening, I can let you know this is the first time I'm recording a podcast with a guest for this podcast, and it happened. So thanks to Jeff and his kindness and patience. It wasn't as scary as it could have been, but I do want our listeners to know that it happened. So if it happens to you, don't worry about it. So we're going to start in with that question again. But as I was saying, your live videos for Social Media News Live are genuinely so warm and welcoming. You can tell that the people that you're talking to. There's a lot of friendly banter and inside jokes. And the people in the chat are getting to know each other too, right? And they're having conversations while you're presenting. And so it's just this wonderful, warm feeling. When you first got started in the creator space and marketing, was this an ultimate vision, or did it evolve out of something else?
So it does take practice. I mean, I'm not going to lie, because one of the things that I try to do is, I look at Lou Mongello, who we both love, and that he gets in. He does this thing on Wednesday where he has all these people join in, and it's just him talking, and it's easy for him because he's got a lot of people. A lot of times when we're first getting started, we don't have a lot of people, and if it's just you talking to the screen, it can be really, really hard. And that's why I didn't do it, and why my show kind of evolved the way it is. I always have a co-host for the most part. Once in a while, that doesn't happen, but and I have a guest that I like to interview, and that, and I really love pulling people's comments from the show and putting them up on screen and kind of trying to get them into the conversation, because I love it. I mean, I get jazzed up on Friday because I get to talk to my friends and these people who have come to my show, like you and others. I mean, they help each other out in the comments. It's so great to see. And then when you mess up, like we had this issue before, and it was, that stuff's going to happen. And I screw up things. I will say the wrong name. I have really screwed up on the show before, and Connor just will look at me or whatever. And my audience gets that, and they let it go. And the same with you. Like when we had this little hiccup before the show, it's not a big deal. I know you, and it's a little bit easier than if you were having somebody on you didn't know, and it's, your first show. So I guess to your question, did I design it that way? I guess I have kind of subconsciously. I didn't sit down and say, whatever. But now I'm very, very I think about that all the time, how I can be authentic, how I can bring my guests in. If you notice on my show, I have 3 different sections, and I usually stop between each section and pull in comments because that gives me a little space to do that with, and I like to do it in that way. So I just, I know some people sometimes struggle. They may be a little bit socially awkward, and those are skills that you can learn. And I had to learn how to listen and do all the tech stuff at the same time, which is really hard and can be overwhelming when you first get started. So I used to actually practice pressing the right buttons. Like I would spend 15 minutes before the show, like, okay, doing this. Okay, this is how I pull up full screen. And then, okay, I'm going to do comments here. And I would practice. I actually had and it's still there somewhere, I had a private Facebook group where I could stream into and practice talking and switching things. And I'm like that. And so just know that your first lives are going to be horrible. They're going to feel really icky and you're going to be super nervous. I remember, I still, and this is funny when I tell people this, like I still get nervous every Friday. Every Friday morning, I'm like, oh, why am I doing this show? This is horrible. Nobody you all have those kind of things and things will screw up. I had cashed in all my chips. This is a little quick story to get Guy Kawasaki on my show. Like he was a big deal. Like, he was, if you don't know who he is, he worked with Steve Jobs. He was their chief evangelist. He has all these stories as a big tech entrepreneur. I cashed in all my chips to get him on my show and he said yes. So I'm getting ready to go and it's right before, they're in the green room and I say, hey, everybody, welcome to the show. And I had a water bottle like this and it was like a plastic one. And I turned and I hit the bottom of my table and it just went, and all the water fell out straight into my lap right before the show started. I'm like, hey, everybody, we're live. And it was a live show. And so I'm sitting there with ice water underpants trying to do the show, the first show, my first big guest. And, then you once things happen, you're like, okay, what could be worse than that? And so, and like, now you know what it's like to have to restart a show. Like, now you don't have to worry about that. You know what to do because it happened. And so, and sharing that with your audience, letting them know this is what happens with tech. It just happens. Things are going to happen. That's how I think you continue on the path to being more and more authentic and letting people know this is me. This is what happens when things go wrong. So I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully it did.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think I think those like self-effacing stories, because it happens to all of us, makes people feel a little less alone. So thank you for sharing that. Because I'm sure like in that moment, you're like, what is happening?
Petrified. Yeah. I mean, and my power went out one time in a big show and like, you cannot do anything. Like I'm not in charge of power. And stuff like that'll happen. And if you're struggling with feeling like you're not authentic, if you're feeling like you're robotic, you'll have some friends who'll tell you like, that wasn't very good. If you have some good friends who'll say like that, you kind of jumped on your guest there, or you kind of did this. Learn and watch. Like seriously, why I joined Lou Mongello's group is because I like Disney, sure, but he had a community, and the way he worked with his community, I wanted to learn how to do that better. And so find those people that you look up to and say, man, they're really authentic. They have a great tribe. What is it about them that people like that I could emulate and be more like of? So, I mean, there's a channel, I watch old Johnny Carson videos because he was like the best interview ever.
Oh, I love Johnny Carson.
Yeah, he was, I mean, he and like another, some of the late night guys are great at doing some of this stuff. So watch them and learn how they're mainly asking questions and then listening. I think that's a big part of it.
What about when you first started? Because you're in this mode now where you have this live show and you've been doing it for years. You've done your own podcast and a lot of other people's podcasts. So you're kind of in a different place than when you first started. But what about when you first started creating? Was there any fear around putting your voice or a blog or a podcast out into the world? And how did you kind of get over that for the, and I hate to say get over that, but how do you conquer that mountain when you first get started?
So you never really get over it. Like I mentioned, like I still get nervous every show. And one of the things, and it's so cliche, but it is so true, you have to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable because, and I tell my kids this, like nothing ever happens that good or takes you to the next level without being hard and makes you feel like you can fail. Like it's just to get when I, when I started, it was how one of the things was like, how do I stand out, right? Like, how do I stand out? I couldn't be like when I was first going. Jay Bear was a big thing. He's this incredible speaker. He has huge podcasts, great following, and I knew I couldn't be Jay Bear. I knew I couldn't be like Michael Stelzner at Social Media Examiner. I couldn't, so I had to find my own style. And you're still always kind of juggling that, trying to figure it out. But Jay wore crazy suits. A friend of mine, Dustin Stouts, always has a red turtleneck. I'm a V-neck, and I'm like, you know what? I'm mainly Pinterest tips. I'm going to grow a beard, and so that's what I did to stand out and be different, was to grow the beard.
We were just talking about your show, and you were talking about when it cut out that time. You were talking about how working with the live shows can be kind of scary,
right,
from the get-go, because you never know what can happen,
right.
and you never know technology-wise whether or not something's going to go wrong. But then we were also talking about when you first got started, the idea of, okay, now you have this live show, you have this amazing community, but it takes time to get to that spot.
Right.
So for someone who's in a different chapter and they're just getting
Sure.
started, when you first started creating, did you have any fear around putting what you've created out into the world? And how did you conquer that fear?
Yeah, so I did, and I still do. Like, you don't want to, everybody doesn't want to look stupid, right? But the thing that the thing is you hold yourself back more than anybody else will. I mean, I could count on my hand the amount of negative comments I've had compared to the good comments. So yes, you're gonna have jerks out there who'll say stuff, but you can't let that stop you. You have to continue to move forward. You have to continue to try new things. If something's uncomfortable to you, then what I try to do is find your own hacks for it. Like if tech is a real issue for you, maybe going live isn't your thing. Maybe you can just do it like we're doing here, kind of a pre-recorded call that you're going to slice up and put out on social. You can practice. Like I mentioned, I had a Facebook group where I practice by myself for a while, and I test things. I test what cameras to do. So, and the other thing is, for me, is I try to always be prepared. The more you can be prepared and kind of rehearse in your mind, I think that helps too. Like, I mean, I always have questions. I don't use all of them because I want to bring up people in the comments more than the questions I have, because I want to make the show for them. So
Sure.
Trying to get over that fear, knowing that it's never going to go away. When people say they are not scared to do that anymore, I don't really, at least for me, I don't really believe them, because I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this for a while and I still get a little nervous. Before like a presentation or anything, those nerves tell you that you change it into excitement. Instead of feeling nervous and fear, if you can kind of psych yourself into being like, okay, I'm not really nervous. I'm really, really excited to do this. I'm really excited to talk with Kira because she's such an amazing interviewer. I just want to make sure that I'm on point for my time with her, because that's going to be, it's really exciting. And so if you can kind of move into that excitement phase instead of the nervousness phase, I feel that really helps a lot.
I think that's such good advice, to use that excitement, because I have heard that said before, and actually
Right.
Connor talked about it on your show just this
I
past
stole
Friday.
it. I probably stole it from Connor, is what I probably did.
No, oh no, but you guys had that conversation.
Right.
And I've heard that said before too, that if your body doesn't really know the difference,
Mm-hmm.
like excitement and nervousness kind of feel the same. And so if you can tell your brain that it's excitement, you can kind of trick yourself into really believing it. So I love that tip. I think it's so good. And I have to start using that myself, because I've heard it, but I've never really tried to trick myself. When you were first getting started, was there someone, a mentor or someone who inspired you, that made you think, okay, I'm going to stop looking at what everybody else is doing. I'm just going to do what I want to do. I'm just going to be myself and put myself out there.
Well, so one of the things that I did, and this is when I first started, and it was right when I started working at Social Media Examiner, I was gonna make the because I had the 4 guys that I was doing it with on Google Plus, and I decided to do my own show, kind of the Manly Pinterest show and podcast. So I didn't know a lot about podcasting, and so I wanted to know more before I launched it. And so what I did is I went to Podcast Movement San Diego, which they kind of tacked on the end of Social Media Examiner one year, and that's where I met Eric Fisher and Anthony Witt, who I have now been in a mastermind with since that time, and I think we're on our 7th or 10th. It's close to getting close to 10 years now that we meet every Monday and we have a mastermind. And those guys are guys I trust. And it was, it didn't start that way, but Eric was a killer podcaster. He still is. He does the Beyond the To-Do List podcast, which is huge. Anthony Witt is an amazing counselor and entrepreneur. And so having those groups, those 2 guys in my corner, really makes a huge difference. To help me, I'm not at the same level that Eric is. He knows things about the podcasting world that I don't, and I'm able to ask him those questions, and he's there to encourage me, and I can help him with some, visual marketing stuff or whatever. So finding those people, I think, is super important, because I'm in a small town in East Texas, right? There's not a lot of podcasters here. There's not a big podcasting group that meets on Friday at the coffee shop. So I had to go out and find my tribe. So I would suggest if somebody's getting started or wanting to do this stuff, is now with technology, you can find people in groups, or you can go to conference and then reach out and form your own mastermind like I did with Eric and Anthony.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. And I think it seems a lot less scary when you're doing it with other people and you realize, and just as entrepreneurs, like I really felt that momentum that was true. That you sit at home and you work from home, and I'm here 24/7. Right. And my husband comes home and I'm like, I'm staring at the walls. I've been staring at the walls all day. Just me, myself, and I. And it gets a little intimidating. And sometimes you feel like you're alone. And then I sat in that room with all of you, and I was like, I am so not alone. And these people are incredible. Right. And so I think that's incredible advice.
And I also had, and this once again goes back to the Google Plus days. I still remember. I would always lurk. I never did the BBS chat rooms. I never did all that stuff back when, AOL, all those, rooms back in the day when the internet came. I never did all that. I was always solo and doing my own stuff and reading and all that stuff. And I remember the first comment I made on Google Plus, like my heart was pounding, like I was talking to somebody else, because I never did that. And that's so weird now that I'm doing social media stuff. But I remember, and I started this conversation asking questions. I was asking intelligent questions because I really wanted to know and learn to this lady named Peg Fitzpatrick. And she worked for Guy Kawasaki. And I didn't know that at the time. She was just posting stuff about Pinterest and, social media. And so I was asking her questions. Well, that led to a relationship. And now, we are good friends. She got me my job doing stuff for Guy Kawasaki. I'm in their book. And it was from just making relationship online with, just intelligent conversation, and really not trying to take. I wasn't always like, help me do this. I was like, hey, why did you do it this way? And why did you do that? And she kind of mentored me through my whole journey. And so, we chatted this morning. We still continue to talk back and forth about industry stuff. And, I know her dog just had surgery. We're friends now. And so I was very blessed to have a mentor who came and helped me out in that way. But you can be that for other people in certain ways. And there are people out there who really want to help you. You mentioned momentum. That is, I love going there because I get so much out of it.
Absolutely. And I do, like what you just said, everybody is there to give. Like we all just want to help each other grow, and we all want to see each other succeed. Yeah. And it's been such a generous and supportive community. And I really think it's one of the best conferences I've ever been to. And because not only do you get value from it that you bring home, but you gain friendships and you gain colleagues. And it's just, I've never had that at any other conference. You go and you take your notes and you go home.
Right. Well, and one of the points I want to circle back on this is the one thing I wish I would have done earlier when I first started my business is not be so worried about competition. Like when you first start, you're always like, if I share this and it's free, then somebody's going to steal it and they're going to make money off of it. And having that attitude of like, I'm so scared to share things because somebody may steal it and it's my stuff that I worked really hard on. If I wish I would have went to and really started collaborating earlier than I did. Like, I wish I would have not had that attitude of like, I'm so scared to put out their stuff out there because somebody will steal it or they'll take it and my stuff that anyway, I just wish I would have stopped that and just went and like, who can I partner with? Hey, that's great. Let's work together on this thing. You get half, I get half. That's where the growth happens, I think. At least for me, it has.
It's so true. I think that's brilliant. And I think if you're listening right now, to really kind of, take a moment and reflect on whether or not you do that. Like, do you feel a little trigger if you have an opportunity to collaborate? Do you get worried about that? And kind of try to work through that, because I totally agree that collaboration is where growth happens, but it's also where personal growth happens because we learn from each other. And on top of that, I've heard a lot of people say, there's so many people talking about social media or marketing or whatever. Like, why do I have to add myself to the mix? So I think comparison is another big problem, where it's like, well, they don't even want to hear what I have to say. So why bother, kind of thing. Did you ever have that?
Oh yeah.
That feeling at that imposter syndrome?
Oh gosh, so another good friend who I met that same conference I talked about with Eric and Anthony, Ian Anderson Gray. He and I talk about, we have a constant thing about imposter syndrome. I don't think, at least most people I know, ever get over it. We always feel like that. I still struggle with it. But the thing is, and you mentioned comparing yourself to other people, and there's a great quote, I can't remember who said it, but comparison is the thief of joy. Which is true.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, it's like that is so true. And nobody can say it the way you do. Like, somebody's going to connect with you and won't connect with me, vice versa. Somebody will, and it's, once again, I wish I would have realized that earlier, is that it's your story. You're putting it through your lens. Even like when you put together like a lead magnet, like this is what you're like, well, everybody has this one. Like, no, they don't, not in your voice and not what you have learned from your experience. And so that's really hard for me. And I still struggle. And a lot of the creator friends that I have, we still struggle for this. We kind of have like this, imposter syndrome, care group that we kind of help each other kind of get out of it. So it's something I think you're going to struggle with, but once again, if you go back to those people that your colleagues and your friends and those groups that you form, you can tell yourself that over and over and over, and it still won't click until you have your friend going, no, really, Jeff, you need to put that out there because that's really, really good. That makes a huge difference.
Right. And I'm totally there. Like, even today, right, when I'm setting up, I don't have like an official podcast studio in the house. We're kind of evolving as I grow this. So for anyone who's listening or who's watching on YouTube, if you're looking at my background and my lighting, it's a little different than Jeff's. And so, even going into this, I found myself thinking about it. I'm like, I don't have cool stuff. I have a closet door.
No. So it's really funny. If you go back to my first YouTube videos, they're still there. And I'm in the same spot. Like, I'm in the exact same spot. This is like from a Home Depot. Like, it's just barn door stuff, and then we got the signs at like Hobby Lobby. But if you I'm in a portable building that we finished out, and I call it the cone of cleanliness because everything else is crap all around. It's on the other around from the camera. But you work your way up. Like, you eventually, I had a microphone just like you for years, and then I finally got a better camera, and then I finally got a better mic, and you can't let that stuff stop you. Now you have a camera that's better than anything that I had on your phone when I first started. So don't let tech or what people say you got to have this and this and this to get started. Don't listen to any of them because it's not true.
Yeah, and I am that person. I have the little blue Yeti. This isn't even a full Yeti.
I used a Yeti for years. The exact same microphone.
And I have my phone camera, just like you said. Like, I get this tiny little setup, and I'll grow. I look at your tech, and every time you have a guest on that's like the Shure microphone people, I was like, add to wish list. Add to wish list. I was like, someday,
Yeah, and that just, it's like you got to, you can't compare your start to somebody else's middle. You just can't. Like, it's just, and I do the same thing. I'm like, why can't I be like Sean Cannell or, why can't I have this big YouTube thing? I mean, there's always going to be somebody better and bigger. There just really is. And you just gotta, put your head down and do what you think you're good at and what you're at. And it can change. Like, things, I never would have dreamed that I was doing this ever. This wasn't a job when I was in high school. Like, this stuff, right? It didn't exist. So, and it's going to take you different paths. It's different seasons. So don't stress too much about it.
Do you think, I think that's so important for the listeners to hear. Do you think that it's more difficult for people of the younger generation who are growing up with social media as a kind of constant comparison? Like, people, when you talk about Google Plus and Flash websites, I'm like, I know what that was.
Yeah.
Like, I sat at a marketing table talking about how important it was that our architecture company had a Google Plus page, and
Right.
and then it just disappeared one day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, as marketing does, right? But
Right.
for people who, like, I was very happy that I grew up without social media and have learned how to use it. But I feel like for younger generations, it's just kind of part of their day to day. And
Right.
people post, beautiful photos and amazing edited videos and all these things. And then do you think it's harder for that younger generation to kind of get past the comparison point? And what advice would you give someone who's, 19 or 20, who's never been without social media in their life?
So that's my daughter. Like, she's working for me now. So it's really interesting. We talk about this because, I think I'm lucky that I didn't have it either. Like, I think, man, this is a whole nother podcast, but the teens and the younger generation and the social media and the danger and the stuff that they're compared to, like, junior high was hard enough without internet. I'm just like, these kids with internet, oh my gosh, how are they surviving? So that's a whole nother thing. But I think for the younger generation, one thing that's never going to change or, that will always be a skill is storytelling. Like, how to tell a story, either if it's in video or it's in audio form. We may have new technologies, the Vision Pro rolled out and you got, virtual reality, but you still have to tell a story inside of it. Everything is a story. And I've had to even learn is like, I grew up with long form content. I never thought I would have vertical video. That was just stupid. Now,
right? We used to fight about that at the marketing table. They're like, why are you filming it like that?
And I'm like, well, see, that's where everything is. And their ability now to tell a good story in under a minute, that is a skill. Like, that's a skill that I'm still working on. And so I think, but storytelling is going to be something for any generation, no matter what. Because we're story people. That's what we do, is we love stories. We tell our stories to other people. We have podcasts about stories. And so I think that's something that they'll need to continue to do. And it may change. It may go back to, like, people are so sick of short form video. We want long form video, and you're going to have to adapt and learn how to tell a story longer. So the more you learn about how to tell stories and storytelling and hooks and all that stuff, it's just going to serve you well.
I'd like to pull on that technology thread a little bit more, because you're also, like, the AI guy.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I love it.
Well, in my world, you are. Like, I go,
Right.
I follow all your stuff. It's so valuable. And I feel like authenticity and AI, some people have questions about that, right? Like, if I'm a writer and I use AI to help me with ideas, or if I'm a video producer and all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, AI can edit this and I don't have to be hours in Premiere. Like, does that take any of the authenticity away from it? And I really believe it can be used as a tool, but I know there are people out there with that question of, like, does it remove that authenticity? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, in some, as it grows, it may get to a point where it does such a great job that you can't tell it, that it's AI or not. For now, I think I'm like with you. I'm more of using it as a tool. I love Descript. We've talked about that before in on Momentum, and for me, it's changed the way I edit. You and I both kind of cut our teeth in editing, and so learning how to edit and edit faster is the thing, and being able to, like, I flub up my words all the time. Like, I'll drop off something, or and be able to go inside of Descript and highlight that word and hit regenerate and have it come in my voice, that's pretty cool that I can do it.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's just really cool. Like if I screw up how I pronounce somebody's name and I can type it in and it'll fix it, like that's pretty awesome as an editing point of view, that I don't have to go and re-record something. That kind of stuff I really like. I also like with the visual stuff, and you saw it for the first time I've ever done it at Momentum. My entire slide deck was AI generated. I created images specifically for that presentation. I didn't hit a button and say, create me a presentation. All my images were ones that before I had always felt like when I'm creating a talk or a slide deck that I have to go and find stock photo that I can kind of pigeonhole into the point that I'm trying to make. Being able to go, and we use multiple images. Like, I mean, we had to dig, and it took us some crafting to get them, but we spent a lot of time doing it. But the image that I wanted to be on that slide, like a lot of us aren't photographers and we can't go out and get a specific image for that slide. We always have to kind of make something work. But it was so freeing creatively to actually have what I wanted on the screen in a style that I want, because it was kind of that 50s atomic vibe that I kind of retro stuff I did. Yeah. I loved it, and it was so much fun to do, and I felt like that's me being even more creative than I could do on my own. So using it, like you said, as a tool, I think is really great. There are some concerns with, them scraping your images, and, Adobe's done some great stuff with, they're only using stuff from their stock library, and there's some other watermarks and stuff other companies are doing. So it's an evolving thing right now, but as a tool, being able to get faster and like make, like now Descript will like find good clips, and I can find good clips to clip to social media shorts. I mean, it's not perfect, but it sure saves me time from having to figure it out myself. So that kind of stuff is really, really cool.
Yeah, and I would argue that almost makes you more authentic, because instead of using your creativity and your brain power on, and I hear Ellen's energy, brain power, Alex, but
Yeah.
instead of using that
Right.
on trying to figure out whether it's in Premiere or some other tool, like, okay, I have to do all these steps to get there. You just have to press a few buttons and it edits, and you're like, okay, now I have more time to be creative about my next show. Right. And just in the prompting of creating those images, like you said, you have something that's super specific in design and how it looked for your presentation. Right. But that was even more authentic to you, because it was like this very stylized look and feel. Right. And you put a lot of energy and time into prompting the computer to do that. Yeah. Because if you and I go to Magi or any of these places and we type in the same prompt, we might get different things. So you really have to learn how to use it. And that's the human side. It's still not quite, it's not Dali yet. Dali is Dali, but it's not Salvador Dali.
I don't, and you know what? I don't, maybe it'll get so good. I mean, there's doing some really cool stuff with video yet, but once again, it's telling a story. It's telling, it's people aren't getting those clicks and stuff just because it's a cool image anymore. It's because it's telling a story. And that's what I keep going back to, is like, how can I, even if it's a podcast interview and I have Kira on my show, how can I make Kira look the best and tell the best story that's going to resonate the best with my audience? Like, I even use it when I prepare for my show with some questions. Like, I use this example all the time, is I had Chris Stone on from Dealcasters, and I also had Jim Fuse, they're part of the Dealcasters team. And I made the mistake of going, hey guys, what do you want to talk about? And they both give me two different things. I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? Guys, I want to, honor what they want to talk about. So I said, hey, ChatGPT, they want to talk. Chris wants to talk about this. Jim wants to talk about this. How can I blend those together? And it did it. And I'm like, I didn't have to sit there and go and try to pick and choose. It just did it. And it was a great show. Of course, I don't read exactly everything it says, but it gets me most of the way there. And then I can take that creativity and make it even better.
Yeah. So I hope for the people that are listening, you can see that right now. I know we're both sci-fi fans too.
Right, yeah.
So there's always the fear, like there's that dystopian robots will take over the world. I don't think we're quite at this. Yeah. We're not WALL-E yet, right? But I do think there can be fear around that, especially in creative jobs and marketing jobs. But if you're listening right now, I hope what Jeff is telling you and what he shared gives you some first encouragement to learn how to use it as a tool, because I don't think it's going to replace marketers, but marketers who know how to use it will have more opportunities.
Yes, I totally agree.
So I think if you're listening, take that to heart and don't be afraid of it, but kind of start engaging with it instead.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because it's, and once again, it's another way for you to tell stories better. Like you have more tools you have more colors or crayons in your box now that you can have to play with. And that's the way I've kind of looked at it too. I don't think anybody in the near future is going to be able to do what you're doing right now, asking questions, follow-up questions as an AI. That's not going to happen. And that's why I love podcasting. That's why I love live video, because it's so authentic and so organic that, being in somebody's ear is really authentic. I mean, they've given you time to talk to them and ask questions of a guest. And so I think that's going to be really, really hard for AI to fake.
So whether it's for future generations just getting started, or somebody who's been dreaming but not doing, like they keep thinking about it, a show, a live show, a podcast, writing a book, just any creative endeavor, or people who are looking at it and saying, okay, he talked about AI. This sounds amazing. How do I build that into my process? What would you tell them about how to be their authentic selves if they still feel really stuck? If they say, okay, I've listened to you guys talk about it, all those things sound really great, but what's like one piece of advice that you might bring out for that individual?
So if somebody, is struggling with like getting started, a lot of times what'll happen is we think the best way to do it is to go get all this information and look at all the people in that same space. And that what happens is we start comparing ourselves to those people. And then we're like, I don't know what to do next. And you get stuck and you're in this like vapor lock. Like you want to be creative, but you're kind of like, you're just like sitting there vibrating, not knowing where to go. So what I have, and I told this at a mastermind the other day, is there's a couple things that I do to kind of beat the procrastination and kind of move forward. I like to chain habits together. Like if you've read Atomic Habits, one of the things is like, when you brush your teeth, floss one tooth, and then you'll move up or whatever. And so one of the habits that I wanted to do was I wanted to journal every day, a little bit. Not like pages and pages, but I wanted to write and have some journal. So what I did is on my iPad is I have a button that unlocks my Office, but right below that is it opens Day One, which is my journaling app. And so I don't unlock my Office until I write my journal. And I've been doing it now for 3 years. So I've chained it together. So I haven't missed a day for 3 years. I've got an unbroken chain for 3 years of writing, at least a paragraph or two in my journal.
Wow.
So and that's not me being super, I'm a very lazy person. So, but chaining those things together gets me something to do. And that's the same thing with when you're trying to be creative or trying to do something. Let's say you want to start a podcast. Okay. First thing I do, I'm just going to say 5 minutes a day. I'm just going to write down podcasting ideas, right? And you do that for a while. And then you say, okay, I'm going to, for 10 minutes, I'm going to actually come up with questions and try to find guests that fit into those questions. And you start just kind of stacking things on top of it. And and then tell somebody about it. Get in the group like we talked about. Say, hey, I'm going to do this. I need you to help me keep me accountable and move forward. And that's the best thing that, I'm a big fan of, I think it's called is it the Hemingway effect? Is before you leave, you write a little bit more for the next day. Like, so you don't look at the blank page. Like, okay, I want to write at least 100 podcasting topics, but I'm going to write 5 today, but I'm going to do 2 more just to get started for the next day. And that kind of preloads you to do that. So those kind of tips for being creative and getting started, I think is the biggest thing. And then as you're doing this, remember who you are. This is all about being authentic. Don't do it from like what Kira's point of view is or Jeff's point of view. What's your point of view on those questions? It may be in the same subject. You may be talking about social media, maybe talking about podcasting, but what have you learned, and try to work that into there, because that's you being authentic. And if you don't know something, like, listen, I didn't know this, but I went down this. Why don't you come down and explore this with me, and we'll learn together, which I think is another great way to be authentic.
I love that so much. I just want to pull out that one little piece of audio over and over again. Don't forget who you are in the process. I love that. That's
Lion King.
It is. Remember.
That's right. Yeah.
No, but seriously, that I got a little choked up when you said that, because I think people genuinely do. They get, I don't know if you've heard this term, but gear acquisition syndrome.
Yeah.
Like they get the gear, they have the background, they, style their space or their clothing just a certain way. And then they don't feel like they can show up as themselves. And so I think if you take anything away from today's episode, take that one little moment that Jeff said away. Like as you're going through this process, do not forget who you are, because that's actually why people will connect with you.
Right.
Not
And some
just the
people
subject
will say they actually, and it's sad, and a lot of people think it's like, but I'm not anybody. Like, why would anybody listen to me? Right. I mean, I felt that before, and I think everybody has felt that. But you know what? You are put on this earth for a reason, and you have a story to tell. There's something that you can tell that I can't tell. There's somebody you can connect with that I can't connect with. And so, but if you keep it all inside, that'll never happen. And so you've got to summon up the courage, and put something out there and start making steps to put something out there. You don't have to do it all at once, but start making those steps and start thinking about, I do have something to offer the world. Everybody has something to offer the world. And so it really saddens me when I hear people like, oh, there's nothing that anybody will listen to me about. I'm like, yes, there are. Of course there are. So
I love that. That's so powerful. And I think it's a perfect kind of ending to the podcast. But before we wrap up, I thank you so much for giving me your time today, for your patience, for saving the podcast. He saved the podcast, y'all, because we were using a different recorder and we switched over to Ecamm just to make sure that we could get through it. And so Jeff, thank you so much. But before we leave, I'll ask you what I will ask every guest, which is, what is authenticity to you? When you hear that term, what does it mean?
Boy, I should have thought about this harder. Is being yourself no matter what you think, because what you think is what a lot of times stops you from being authentic. Like we just talked about, that I don't have anything to say. Nobody's going to listen to me, but don't let yourself stop you from being authentic. Like, go out there and share what you have to the world, and I bet you'd be really, really surprised.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Absolutely
It's awesome.
perfect.
Thank you for having me.